Wonderful.
The area is, Fred here, the area has been on and off production for over 500 years. So it's one of those ones where to date we've mapped over almost 5,000 old workings on the site. And those workings have extended from the days the Aztecs were busy mining there to the conquistadors, and then on to relatively modern times, primarily chasing the silver, but more recently we're also starting to aggressively look at one section of the property which seems to be in higher grade golds right now. So that one we're pursuing as well. In fact, we're drilling one of the smaller targets right at the moment.
Wonderful. And this is Peter Bell. I'm here with Mr. Fred Davidson and Jerry Huang, Impact Silver. Thank you very much, Fred, for telling me about some of the current drilling. I've seen the recent news release there, February 19th, just a couple days ago. I didn't get the impression that it was a smaller target. Is that what you were referring to?
Oh, it's actually a vein system. That's what I'm talking about. There's the veins in the area. It's in a deep canyon. Seem to be radiating out from a larger, what could be a porphyritic target below. That's why I say it's a smaller target.
Yeah.
We mine veins and we make a lot of money mining the veins. The porphyry is the real blue sky at this point in time.
Ah, wonderful. So many questions, so many things to discuss. Maybe just to mention the porphyry there. There's some porphyry mining going on in Mexico, but not your focus, obviously.
No, it's we find and we have been mining very successfully over the last number of years. The vein systems, some of them are probably related to this porphyry if it's there. Some of them are just the very nature of the mineralization in the area. The density of veins is incredible, and we literally describe them in swarms as opposed to sort of an individual vein.
Yeah.
Now that's in the northern part of the property. As you go south, we get into volcanogenic massive sulfides. And as Jerry mentioned, we have a second mill that we built as a pilot plant and tested a deposit down in the southern end of our property. It's a VMS. It's be a medium grade type VMS, fairly sensitive to the price of silver. We've done a fairly extensive amount of work on it. We bulk sampled it. We've tested the backs on it. The numbers are there. We're very confident of the metallurgy, etc. But at this point in time, we need a higher price of silver to really make it go.
Yeah.
But that area is still wide open for exploration. There's at least two other targets, VMS targets, in the immediate vicinity of this particular one, the Kapiri. So again, we're target rich, and it's just like little kids. We can't figure out where to spend the money first.
Well, exactly it, right? And being a pure play silver producer, and then having porphyry copper targets, that's probably not the focus. Or the, to keep
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. The porphyry, and again, I have to emphasize if it's there, we're certainly seeing smells. I mean, as we go to depth on our veins, we go from very high grade silvers on surface, and that's not secondary enrichment. That's basically sulfides. You get a kilo, 2 kilos at surface. As you go to depth, maybe 250, 300 meters, the grade of the silver falls off when we get into lead zinc. And then once we get beyond that, there's sort of a dead area, if you will, lower grade. And then we get into sort of this gold and then gold copper range. And what's making it interesting is we've been mining, let's say, for quite a while. As this particular canyon, well, let's put it this way. It's a steep valley if you're in good shape. It's a canyon if you're not. This particular canyon exposes the opportunity to get down 250, 350 meters. And that's where we're seeing the gold and at depth the copper. So it's a very interesting area. There's just so much exploration potential, yet we've probably only tested maybe 10% of the entire area we have there to any degree.
And it's amazing to hear mention of, you know, going back 5 years. It looks like they're in news releases back to 2014 and before that even too, right? Not just the old mines going back hundreds of years, 500 years, as you're saying, but, within your tenure as well.
Yeah, yeah, we sort of, it's been a sort of, as Jerry described it, a bootstraps operation.
Yeah.
The initial raise was literally to buy the property, and most of a good percentage of the money spent afterwards was funded from operations. And you, because of the fluctuations in the price of silver, the fluctuations in the American dollar and the peso, we tend to sort of go back and forth from one vein to another vein, and we mine proportionally what makes sense in terms of numbers. Uh, there's still a lot of stuff underground there that we haven't mined simply because the price of silver has dropped. We'll go back in and chase it if the price of silver upticks. And with the mill capacity, we've got a capacity of about 650 tons a day. We're mining at about 400 because we're basically going for higher grade material, reflecting the lower price for silver at this moment. But
Yep.
yeah, we've got a lot of opportunity to sort of pull from here and there whenever we feel that there's better grades needed.
And mine fleet, underground drill rigs, everything like that. Is that all your own equipment?
Yeah, except for exploration drills, all the rest is ours. I've got to admit, it's not particularly pretty. We've got the thing about Mexican miners and the engineers that work with them is they really know their stuff. And they can take something that'd be a piece of equipment that most people would discard in North America, and they can make it work very efficiently in Mexico. And they do a heck of a good job. High quality miners, high quality engineers. So, and we are 100% Mexican down there, with the exception of the 43101 geologists, the Canadian geologists we have. So we're recognized as a Mexican company. We're wrecked by the local community. We're recognized as a Mexican company by the government. And as a result, they've been very fair with us.
Yeah, certainly. Wonderful to hear it. I wonder, safety, any information, operational side there?
Yeah. Say we've been operating there for a long time.
Yeah.
We've never had an incident. And there's one of those situations where I think people are probably don't recognize the difference between the conflicts that may be occurring, primarily amongst the guys who are trying to ship illegal things out of the country and locals. And we go out of our way to make sure we don't trip over them. They seem to be going out of their way to make sure they don't trip over us. The end result, as I say, in the whole time we've been there, we've never had an incident, and I don't think we will with the way we work with the local community. We're the biggest employer in the area. We've got about 260 employees on site. They're all locals. They tap us on the shoulder if they think there's an issue, and basically say, hey, let's just be a little quiet in that particular area we're working, and then we do it. So yeah, we've never had a problem.
Funny to hear you mention it, because I was thinking underground mine safety.
Oh, well, in that case, well, the reason I mentioned the other one is people raise that all the time. Mexico is
Yeah.
actually a good place to work. Mine safety, what makes this exceptional, this is about the fourth underground mine I've been involved with, is the ground is extremely competent.
Yep.
We have to do very little rock bolting, very little screening. And the other part of that very competent rock is when we take a round, a blast, the vein tends to fall away very neatly from the wall rock when you take very little dilution. There seems to be a vein and then about an inch and a half of what you'd call gouge, and then the host rock. And when you blast it, that gouge seems to be the absorb the blast. And the host rock, after you've been mining there, you can run your hand over it and not cut your hand. It's that
Wow.
smooth. So
Yeah, that's
it's
amazing.
ideal mining conditions. Yep, it's great.
And to hear you say fresh sulfides too, from surface with high grade silver material there, it's kind of puzzling to me. I wonder where's the oxidation?
Very nominal. We don't experience very much oxidization in the area. Having said that, I mean, there are one or two veins that we're actually not working on that have some significant oxidization. The bulk of where we're mining doesn't. You might get it down 5 or 10 meters, and that's about it. Once in a while, in an old working, we'll find that somebody maybe 200 or 300 years ago was working on the oxides. Um, but no, it's we get very little oxidization for the most part. And the end result is, I mean, there's when we get a grade in the floor of an old working, and a lot of our exploration is going into these old workings, uh, it tends to be sulfides, and there's been a couple of situations. I can remember, I think it was at San Ramon when we first went in there a number of years ago, Michael, at the very start. They were direct shipping the ore to the smelter. It was so high grade.
Yeah, wonderful. That's the story of a lot of these old mines, right? This.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's interesting because you go in and there's a fair bit of water. Nothing that's serious that you can't handle nowadays,
Yeah.
but in when somebody's sort of dewatering with a leather bucket, it's probably a little too much. Uh, and we'll drain one of these old workings, and you'll find a kilo in the floor. And I guess they just decided that was too much to handle with the water flows. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very attractive area to work in.
I wonder the flow sheet too. It looks pretty simple from what I can see. The Guadalupe Production Center there, basic photos of the ball mill and flotation
Oh
circuit, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. We've got a jaw crusher at the beginning.
Yeah,
Then you're going. We've got two cone crushers, and then from there on in, it's into. We've actually got three ball mills, and
great.
then we're taking and the floats. We're recovering primarily right now only a lead con. There's not enough zinc. We're getting just plainly the most of the silver reports to the lead. We're pulling off a lead con. We don't take it beyond a lead con. We
Okay.
ship it off that way. It gets around all sorts of issues, and we're getting some pretty good returns on that stuff and very good recoveries. So we're happy with what we're seeing at the moment.
And cash flows and cost numbers here in recent years.
Yeah, the costs all in, or we're sustained costs are probably right now about $1 above the current price of silver. Um, and but that's an all-in sustained cost. We're working on getting that down. Some redundancies, some, as I say, moving out of some of the workings that are slightly lower grade and into the higher grade workings. These things, it's not like flipping a switch, as you know. It takes you a good 3 to 6 months to sort of reorientate what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. We have to learn to live with the current prices, and we think we can.
Well, it seems like a lot of the global production is, you know, questionable there. It's that cost curve and
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and
silver.
costs are rising in the industry. There's no
Yep.
question about it. And the only constraint we've got is it slows down our exploration. I say we've got a
Yep.
massive property. It's 353 square kilometers. Um, and the problem is we've probably explored, as I say, about 10% of it.
Wow.
And it's 20% max. And it's very frustrating because exploration, as you know, over other than sustainable exploration, is an elective,
Yeah.
and when you're tight on cash, you don't do it. And we're actually quite pleased with the recent raise we're doing. We're into drilling that they say that target right now, which is actually a gold target. And we're going to be drilling another silver target as well, aiming for the higher grades, because the whole theory is you want to put it through at a profit, and that's going to
Yep.
be the objective.
No, find high grade material where you can, mine it.
Well, that's exactly right. And, once in a while, we've had one called, for instance, one mine, Chivo, it was running at over 700 grams a ton. And we had a couple of good years of production out of that mine.
Yeah.
And then it sort of, the grade fell off and the price fell off the same time. So the Chivo is sort of on care and maintenance at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, we run into those sections, and when you get a chunk of something like the Chivo, you can easily develop 500,000 tons, and that makes us all happy. And the mill guys are dancing because the recoveries tend to go up with higher grade.
Nice. And it's a hungry mill. Keep it fed. 5,000 documented old mines and prospects you've cataloged there. It would seem that it gives you lots to pick through in the search for high grade. I wonder how much of those you've done kind of grab or channel sampling.
20%.
Again, yeah, fair enough. No, it's
Yeah. No, I
and
mean, we've done some soils out of those areas, and yeah, okay, it might be a little higher than that because somebody's done a grab sample, but I don't regard a grab sample as other than indicative and nothing more.
yeah,
And
yeah,
quite frankly, in a lot of the veins we've got, you do a grab sample and you get grade because the damn geologists always pick the good-looking rocks.
yeah,
Uh, you go in and do a channel sample, and that's a different animal. So we don't even consider something other than good grab sample says we'll go out and take another look at it. But
yeah, yeah.
there's whole areas of the property we've never even been to.
Yeah, I see off to the southeast there, all that blue sky with no veins marked or anything quite yet, but I'm sure there's some reason to expect continuity. And I don't quite know what the relief and topography all looks like there, but uh,
Well, it's pretty vertical. Let me tell you, it's if you stretched out, it'd probably be about twice the size.
yeah,
But you will notice on that one, there's a couple Pergolas, for instance, and one or two others in that area. We actually found some old mine maps that were about 250 years old, and so the guys went out to just try and relate where this darn thing was. They just driving out there took them 4.5 hours.
wow,
They discovered old workings, and including an old, what probably related to the Spanish era, but we're not sure, couple of mills. So again, it's one of those areas you'd make a whole story about if you were another company. And
yeah,
uh,
exactly right.
we only did one campaign out there, and we haven't been out there since.
Well, and to that, I'd ask why Santa Teresa?
Well, Santa Teresa is interesting because it's got the gold, and what makes it even more interesting is above it, about 300 meters above it, when we were drilling a silver vein up above, uh, we encountered an uplifted uh, gold vein, and that uplifted gold vein looks like it was by stratigraphy maybe 250, 300 meters vertically uplifted, and it averaged 3 grams, and I think the highest grade assay we got in it was 20 grams gold. Uh, so we're looking at it, and we sort of look down the steep hill. Let's call it a steep hill, and you know, about half a mile away, down at the bottom of this steep hill, is Santa Teresa. And we're looking there and saying, oh, if that's continuity, this is a hell of a target.
Right. Okay.
Uh, And along with that, Santa Teresa's on a hillside, so it's relatively easy to explore. You don't have to do a lot of trenching, it's exposed. And in fact, the exposure, if I recall, I think on surface was 50 meters. It ran about, oh man, 6.5 grams. I might be wrong on that, but I think it was 6.5 grams gold over about 1.66 meters wide for that whole distance. That's a fairly attractive target.
Yep.
And, and the nice thing was it was exposed on surface on about a 30-degree slope. So
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
there was some continuity there. In the area, we're finding porphyritic rock, we're finding gold, copper, we're finding copper itself. It's just a very interesting area, and we focused on this one particular vein just because we had exposure over that 50 meters. And
Great.
I'm not saying it's going to be the end all or be all. I'm just suggesting that it's sort of indicative of what we can find here with the literally hundreds of samples we did grab in the area that were running 1 gram or better.
Yeah, wonderful. And I wonder, where is it in property wide? Is it up kind of by the Guadalupe mine there, or is it down to the south?
It's near the
You're right.
Guadalupe. You could access the Guadalupe with it, and the Guadalupe could handle it if in fact we decide to mine it. We did run the Carlos Pacheco, which was this other gold vein we found near surface, and we got good recoveries on it. So we may even do a batch mining if this thing is real, between the Carlos Pacheco and the Santa Teresa, and say have a day a week or 1 week a month where we strictly do the gold.
I see it. There it is. Yep, I see it on the map now, just south of Carlos Pacheco there. Thank you. And
Yep.
that is an old producing mine there. It looks like there's just looking at the main veins indicated a bunch of kind of northwesterly trending below to the southwest of that, but then there's some kind of something happening geologically there. Seems to the angles on things are changing.
Yeah, you got
much
her.
more to the northeast.
You got her. There's 2 major structures coming through here that are running northwest southeast, and then as one of the geologists described to me, and he did it rather classically. He said, imagine a block of cheddar cheese, and you push on one side of it and pull on the other side of it. You get fracture zones laddering that goes north-south. And he said all of that occurred pre-mineralization. And the north-south ones tend to be the sort of more exciting ones, although the ones that are run northwest southeast tend to be the bigger ones. And some of those bigger ones run literally kilometers. I mean, we have one viewpoint where you can look out, and basically for about 3 or 4 kilometers, one vein running right over the hillside.
Well, and you zoom out even further than that, right? And you look at Toxco, your property, La Guitarra, Angangueo up there, further on to the northwest.
You got it. As a matter of fact, a lot of our guys have worked at Tasco, and they can actually identify some of the big veins.
Yeah.
So it's structurally, it's a big area. Obviously, very strong structure coming through there, and especially as you peel off of the north-south ones, I'm not sure if there's a secondary occurrence that created those that have been particularly high grade, but they are particularly high grade.
Yeah. Well, and the good news from an exploration perspective of you tackling an area like that is, you can do some of the met testing yourselves, and you have teams of geologists on, experts who already know the area well. And I see appointing Jim Oliver as well as a consulting geologist.
That's right. We got Jim in there in case our guys become sort of, how you get a little blinded by working on something for too long. And Jim was an ideal guy because he sort of sat back and, hey, looked at the data. Our data set is huge. We've incorporated all those old maps, every sample that's ever been taken in the whole area, uh, and it literally burns up a computer every once in a while. Uh, and the problem is you get so caught up in the detail, maybe you lose perspective, and that's why we brought in Jim. And as you know, he's technically one of the most competent guys around. And
And
standing back, he can look at it and say, "You guys just aren't looking at the right stuff." And I
think
think he
bigger,
basically,
think bigger.
yeah, exactly. And in fact, he was pushing that, think bigger, you
Yeah.
know. So as you say, this one little target we're drilling will theoretically support some of his theories.
Okay, wonderful. Um, yeah, I wonder the mineralogy and stuff too. You start checking out what might be in there and indications of things coming from greater depth and some of these bigger geological ideas that might be at play. Wholly out of my depth expertise, but glad to hear the experts are on the case.
Oh yeah, well, it's certainly out of mine, and but I tend to be more the mining orientation, and I always laugh because the geologists invariably after you've mined it will tell you why it was there. Um, I'm going to get abused by some of the other geologists, some of the geologists when they hear that, but
Well,
it's true. I mean,
it's a challenge to these different disciplines, right? And the engineers, the geologists, changing between the who is in the leadership role in the company. It has a big effect on where the company goes. Um,
oh, that's exactly right. I have to sit in between the two of them and translate.
well, Jerry in the mix too, younger guys, business training and stuff too. I'm sure he'll help keep the feet on the ground. And George Krasinski, great to see him in the mix, another engineer.
Yep. Yeah, he's a geological engineer too, so he sort of steps between the boat and the wharf at times, which is probably good. But yeah, it's an interesting group, and I say it's just such a big project. It's you got your hand in the cookie jar, and trying to take out all the cookies at once is very difficult.
And you're a CA and a CPA.
Yeah, no, don't hold that against me. I'm a nice
I
guy.
know. Sorry.
Uh,
Sorry to bring it up in polite company.
I got into this when I was teaching at UBC,
Yeah.
and this is about this is the fourth underground mine and the fifth mine I've been directly involved in, and it gets into your blood, as you know, and you just and this one just has all the right smells about it. It's just size, potential, type of mining, just the overall comfort level you look for when you're trying to develop a project.
Yeah. Well, and I like to say sometimes that exploration's a terrible business, and the only thing worse is production. Um,
That's true.
right? And you guys would know that very well here with current pricing environment.
Oh
Has
yeah,
it
yeah.
has it been touch and go at any point, really, with risk of financial distress or?
Well, we got enough people who believe in it. It doesn't get too critical. We got a little low in the cash, and we did a quick raise of 1.7 million on it. I didn't really want to do it, but the price was it was available, and I always like to have a sort of a million in your back pocket because it's a business you can go through millions very quickly.
Yeah,
Uh, I, it's one of those that up till recently, say over 50% of all the work has been paid for out of operations. And those
yeah,
operations support a lot of the geology, like the mine lab does a lot of our laboratory work, stuff that we can't publish, of course. Uh, and the vehicles, the equipment, supplies, support, accommodations, all of that are all taken care of in the mining costs. So it helps. It really gives us an extra leverage.
well, so many issues that come along with that, right? for an
Oh yeah.
exploration company that's a junior, every sample that they might send off to the lab is, probably material news for them that they'll want to press release. And to think that, for producers of any scale, large or small, right? You guys, that there's exploration results that you might have that you're not able to really communicate broadly. That just adds a whole bunch of mystery to the situation for people, I think.
Yeah, I guess it does. Because the number of targets we're looking at is so huge. If we published every one, I think everybody'd fall asleep. What we try and do is publish those that we think represent something, whether it be a geological interpretation or direction that we're working. The sort of day-to-day stuff we do, the soils, rock chip sampling and that, we normally don't even mention. We did mention the Santa Teresa area because we had over 100 samples, I think, that ran over 1 gram of gold.
Oh,
Now that was regarded as significant, uh, only because it now leads us to why are you chasing gold? Well, we had this massive number of samples that were gold, but for the day-to-day stuff, no, we just that's part of production,
exactly
year
right.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, the questions around the financing too, right? And how many different, how many rounds, how many times have you come to the market for equity finance?
Over 12 years, 4 times or 5 times maximum. The first one was to buy the thing, so I guess that's really 3 or 4 times that we've actually put money into the ground, etc.
Yeah. And amazing to see no debt on the books either.
Well, this business is one of those tough businesses. Debt's always exposes you to the problems of debt. Yeah, you get leverage from it if things are going well, but you get kicked in the butt if things aren't.
Oh
So
yeah,
we
very
like to be
dangerous.
fairly conservative with our balance sheet.
Yeah, good work. Any shareholder rights plan or anything like that?
Not really. Guess we should look at it. It's one of those issues, but the focus up right now has been to create value,
Yeah,
and that's quite frankly tying up most of our time.
yeah,
Uh,
certainly.
the rights plan, I mean, we can always implement one if we get somebody sniffing around, but this is a funny market right now. Nobody's doing an awful lot at the moment. And
Yeah,
one of the things you do notice is we don't have a very large resource. In fact, the only resource we have is on the VMS.
yeah,
Even though we may have mining plans out 3 and 4 years, none of that is a resource for 43101. And in fact, what we mine, we can't even call ore, but we've been mining this rock now for 12 years.
yes. So, thanks to if any Canadian regulators happen to be listening or reading a transcript of anything like this, um, that would, I'd hope that would give them pause, right? Oh, I,
Well, I understand the need for it. But our problem is you either spend money interpreting the whole area, or you spend money sort of picking a scab of defining a very small resource. And we're tight for cash. We try and spend our money wisely from a mining point of view. For
yeah,
instance, we generally in these veins we'll do 50-meter centers just because we know historically in this whole area, 50-meter centers is adequate.
yes,
At that point in time, we then go underground because our mining costs are so low. Perforating the thing with full of holes isn't justified when we can go underground and actually start mining it. So
that's right. Yeah,
it's a different strategy, and I understand where they're coming from. You know, they've got to do something to regulate it, and we just live with it.
yeah. That's amazing to think about these veins stretching along for kilometers there without a lot of disruption. And yeah, and that's the 50-meter centers, as you say. Um, I wonder how much information is there out there, really about developmental costs, any of the operational details.
Well, we try and provide most of it in the quarterly. And I think our quarterlies are fairly complete. We've always gone for having high-end advisors. I mean, we use Price Waterhouse, et cetera, so I think they're happy with our disclosure. I say we've got 343-101 geologists on the project, so I think our disclosure there is more than adequate. It's just one of those things that the rules are such, we have to do it the way we do it. And you live with that. We do, and we have taken mine tours on a regular basis, especially when there was analysts, because we believe the best thing to do is to walk people over the project. And as you've seen, we've done sort of a homemade version of walking it through the mill and everything else on the website. So sort of a cheapo tour. But that's about all we can do realistically without going bankrupt trying to take tourists. So going forward, we will probably do the same thing and just keep on demonstrating that this thing's very real.
Yeah, certainly. I wonder, dividend or anything like that, or has there, I'm sure it's been the subject of conversation in the past.
Yep. Right now, that's obviously not on the cards. The dividend is going to be a function of cash on hand, obviously, and we do have that sort of balance between, do you spend the money on dividends, which will give you a bit of an uptick in the market, or you spend the money on exploring the other 80% of the property we haven't even walked on and hopefully getting even a bigger uptick in the market. So it's a balance that we're looking at, and I don't think most people buy us for dividends. I think they buy us, even though we're a producer, we're a small producer, they buy us for the exploration potential, and of course the leverage we get as probably the purest silver play in Mexico. I mean, 90% of our production is silver. So when the price of silver goes up, it goes right to the bottom line for us.
Well, and again, the shareholder rights plan, it's one thing to be fairly tightly held, but the silver space is competitive and probably increasingly so.
Oh yeah, yeah, and actually we're not fairly, we're fairly broadly held by a lot of retail, which is, I think, is kind of neat. We've got a couple of institutionals in there, and but for the most part, I think we trade fairly cleanly. And in terms of volumes, definitely it's an emotional volume out there. Silver prices go up, all of a sudden you get phone calls from people you haven't heard for 6 months. They like silver. It's very leveraged to the price of silver, no question.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Fred Davidson, President CEO, Impact Silver Corp. Thanks very much for talking with me.
Good to talk to you. Have a good day now.